Hello and welcome to New Filmmakers Los Angeles. My name is Danny De Lillo. I'm delighted to be joined by Eugene with his fantastic movie, Master of Divinity. Nice to have you here, Eugene.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here. Thank you.
No problem. And for those that haven't seen the film yet, you have to see it. Here is a clip.
About to prepare for her and her husband, James. We just continue to ask you to give them protection, wisdom, and guidance. So Young, we know you've been a leader here.
Eugene, I love your film. It had so much in it, and the story was so good. I loved it.
Thank you.
And I don't want to give too much away just yet. But for those that haven't seen it, tell us a brief synopsis.
So I think the way I would describe it is this. So this is a movie that focuses on a married couple. So the husband is a struggling filmmaker living in Koreatown. He is an ex-seminarian. I think for reasons that you will probably get a glimpse of in the film. He has a lot of issues with the Christian religion. He struggles with his faith. So everything is going well. He kind of spent his day writing screenplay. He's trying to make it as a filmmaker, but all comes to a boiling point when his wife, who's highly religious, when she breaks the news to him that she feels now is the time for her to quit her job, and that job is obviously, the thing that's able to sustain their life and career collectively, and she believes that this is a prophecy, a sign from God, and she tells him so, and obviously, being who he is, he freaks out. He thinks this is ludicrous. And then the movie is really about what happens after that.
Yeah, I love it. Like I got so much from it. I actually was like, please, can this be a feature? It's all good.
Yeah.
I really did. And it was such an inspiring story. And I'm curious, where did the inspiration come from in creating this particular project?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a couple things. I think on the more the broader, the more macro level, I think I've always wanted to make a movie that deals with religion, because I myself, I come from the Christian tradition, and I just have a lot of fascination with it. I wrestle with it. I struggle with it, and obviously, religion is one of the main. You can argue it's one of the most formative forces in all of our lives, whether we're religious or not. Religion shapes culture, it shapes individual life, it shapes our collective consciousness, it influences politics, political decisions, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
So it's something that is just, it's an essential part of the human experience. So I think on just the macro level, I've always had the ambition to do something with religion, just, dealing with it in a very thoughtful and hopefully entertaining and engaging way. But on a more sort of storytelling level, the particular inspiration actually came from my wife herself. We went through this a couple of years ago, where in real life, you write what you know, right? So she basically, came to a point where she had been working for a very prominent corporation for a long period of time, and then she basically came to a decision, feeling like it was time for her to move on from that. So we had a discussion about that, and she is, I'm religious myself, but she is even more religious than I am, if I may put it that way. So she basically was convinced that, this is maybe, as I think Christians would call it, it's, she thought she was led by God to make this decision. And unlike my character in the movie, I was very supportive. I'm a great husband. I'm just a great guy. So I was actually very supportive, because I thought, she, for reasons that are personal to us, I thought it was the right call for her to do that. But obviously, when you are, when you are a filmmaker and working in the film industry, having a stable income, a stable source of income stream, that's very important. So I did go through a period of time when I was worried, I think for good reasons, worried about our financial situation, worried about how life is going to turn out. And thankfully, we were able to sort of make it through that chapter of our life. But that did give me an inspiration. I basically thought to myself that, what if I was a less supportive person? What if I was the real asshole about it? What if I just, don't go along with it? And what would be the possible reasons for that? So it really was that particular incident that kind of gave seeds that gave rise to this particular story. So everything that happens in it subsequently is fictional, but the central kind of inciting incident is very much based on real life.
Well, I thought this relationship between husband and wife was so fantastic, because often than not, you don't always I don't think that the idea of religion on both sides is kind of portrayed in the right way, when like there's clearly love between this couple. and both are having different kinds of struggles, but it's like you hope that love is going to unite you both together through those struggles. And I think that, you know, you showed, you know, good faith with your, you know, with each of their faith and what they were going through, and it kind of brought them together, even though they're both kind of being drawn apart from it at one particular point. And I really love that, and the sort of journey that you took them on, and they, you know, they grew closer together. I thought your cast was so good. I really
Thank you.
thought they were brilliant. How did you bring your cast together?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think it's one of those things where, you know, some people say that casting really is, you know, 80-90% of directing. And I really got to understand that truth. I mean, I think that really is just the truth of filmmaking, that I think when you have a good cast, they elevate the film in ways that you could not have anticipated. So in this case, actually, I was very lucky. Just about everyone on my cast, with the exception of Jennifer Sue, who plays the wife, with her being the exception, everyone else is a personal friend of mine. So these are actor, you know, friends in my circle, who I've, you know, been friends with for a long time, who I've adored. So honestly, so part of this film, you know, half of it was me, like I was saying, it was me sort of, you know, wrestling with this incident that really happened in my real life. So I was kind of making sense of it. So on the other hand, this was also kind of an excuse, frankly, for me to, you know, come up with a story that I would allow my really wonderful actor friends to sort of shine and play these parts that, you know, give them opportunities that they otherwise might not have. So like June Kim, who plays the husband, who's the lead. So he's a quite an experienced actor who's acted in Korea, in Korean movies, Korean television shows. He's on a number of American films and American TV series as well. So he, for me, June, like, you know, I don't know how much time I have, but June, I think, is just he is like, to me, a quintessential leading man. He has the looks, he has the acting chops, and I don't know why that guy is not a bigger movie star. So for me, it was like, gosh, this guy is so good. I gotta find a vehicle for him to do. No, thank you. So you know, he's been in a number of films. You guys can look him up, and he's always been consistently solid. But I just feel like I haven't seen a film that really kind of allows him to, you know, chew the scenery and to really play with it. So I wrote that part specifically with him in mind. And the pastor too, Johnny Kwong, who's a classically trained actor.
Really?
Yeah, that guy. So the Pastor Lee, who's one of the major supporting characters in this movie. So that's played by Johnny Kwon, who's a classically trained actor who's been in many stage productions over the years. So again, he's someone who I just always been a fan of personally. But I just thought, oh, this guy in real life, he's so funny. I gotta write something.
So funny. I literally found, like, he's so funny. He does things that, like, so unique, like, you know, his comedic style is brilliant. Like, I found him hysterical. I think he's so good.
It's funny because the way I wrote the character, a lot that was really dictated by his personality, because I wrote it with him in mind. And in real life, he's not quite as, you know, he's a pretty serious person, in fact, but I've seen glimpses of that where he's capable of being very goofy and very affable in a way that seems almost kind of naive and funny. So I knew what he was capable of, and I wrote that part accordingly. And he was so good that, in fact, when we were on set, when we were just rehearsing, you know, he was like prepping for the part, there were crew members who would kind of come up to me and they would whisper to me and they would say, like, where'd you find this guy? Like, is he a real Korean pastor? Or who is this dude? Because he showed up. I again, because this was a low budget movie, we didn't have a substantial budget for really anything. So in terms of costume and makeup, the actors really took care of that themselves. So Johnny, the only instruction I gave him, I said, you know, Korean pastors, they usually wear short sleeve, you know, button up shirts with a tie. So just, you know, do something like that. So I didn't check. I just told him to just come, show up as a Korean pastor. And then when he came on set, he was that character, and he never disappeared. He never became something else. He was that character throughout the entire production.
It was really fascinating and really, really wonderful to watch. I loved you know, this, I'd say you found this, you know, location, which was this you know, this church, and I love the kind of atmosphere you kind of created in this set. It was really quite, yeah, I guess quite, it did feel like I was there at a church. It really did. But how was the process with the whole locations and finding that and connecting that all together? How was that process for you?
Yeah, that you know, that's a good question, because for me, one of my agenda or secret goals with this movie is that, in addition to what I mentioned earlier, I wanted to make a movie about religion that really takes the idea of religion seriously and deal with it in a very serious and thoughtful way. I was also wanting to specifically deal with this subculture that exists, which is the Korean Christian culture, and even more specifically, the Korean, what's known as the Korean, the charismatic subculture, the Pentecostal subculture.
Yeah.
That itself is a subculture within the larger Korean Christian community.
Yeah.
And that's very particular. So what you see in the movie in terms of the practice of prophecies, and even things I didn't show, people who speak in tongue, who engages in prayers of healings and so on. These are very regular rituals and practices within that community. So I really want to capture that. So this church that you see in the movie, that's a real location. As Danny and I, as you and I were kind of talking earlier before the taping started, that's a real church in Koreatown. I barely did any set dressing and production design. That church, that's a church that I had been to several times with friends and my wife. It's a location I was very familiar with. Every time I went, I would think to myself, I gotta make a movie that takes place here, because people don't see this world. Really. Like I have this almost like a secret access to it because of my connections and people I know. So I asked the pastor, the leader who owns the space, whether or not I would be able to film here, and then he let me do it free of charge.
Perfect.
So it was like, worked out.
It's amazing. Well, I mean, listen, considering this has got such a a personal element to you, in terms of things that you have been through, talking about faith, faith within family, all of those different things, all the kind of subculture elements that come into it. What did you kind of want your audience to take from your film?
That's a really good question, because for me, I think there were a number of things. I think at the outset when I was writing the story, because the seed of it is based on real life, but the rest is in terms of what happens in the rest of the movie, without giving anything away, that's all kind of fictional. So when I was writing it, I think this really taught me actually a lot about the writing process, which was there were a lot of ideas and messages I wanted to deal with, but primarily I really was just focusing on telling a story that I thought would be surprising and engaging. So it was in that process of figuring out, okay, where can the story go? What are possible ways to make this really unexpected and to make it interesting to the audience? So without thinking anything about ideas or philosophies or ideologies, it was really more about what is a good story that I can tell. And once the narrative started to take shape, that's when I realized, there are actually a lot of kind of fascinating, provocative questions that I can sort of embed in this. I think for me, it came from a very personal place, because I am religious, but like the character, I think the character is very much an exaggerated version of me. I'm not quite as cynical or as angst-ridden as he is, but I did pour a lot of that kind of things that I struggle with, things that I am mad about, things about religion that frustrate me, that make me doubt and question. I put a lot of that into the character. So I think on one level, it was just me actually engaging in a form of self-therapy, almost like, I just wanted to kind of get this out of my system. But then really showing this contrast between, a guy who's probably on the more cynical side, and a girl who I think, the wife, who I think some audience might think she's on the more naive side. You have someone who's maybe overly cynical, the other person who's maybe overly naive. And that's a good sort of screwball comedy setup. You have two people who are on the polar opposites, but they're married. And what is it that kind of holds them together? And then so I really kind of want the movie to play that out in terms of the tensions that they have, because that's a real tensions that a lot of people are experiencing in their marriage, their relationship, dealing, people might, share the same faith or the same, political orientation, but then having a lot of differences in that. So it was really me trying to kind of work out that tension and try to find some sort of resolution through that.
I'm so glad. I mean, your faith is such a personal, it's such a personal thing. And so when you're sharing that with the person you love and talking about that and sharing that, and sometimes you can be at different levels of your faith at different times. Faith is a journey. You're constantly evolving how you feel, what you feel, things that make you angry, things that make you happy. So I think it was really nice to show that, because I think it's got kind of a universal perspective that maybe a lot of people go through and have questions to answer and things like that, which is really, really great. And I think you captured that so wonderfully well.
Thank you so much.
With these characters. What I want to ask though for you is what is next? What's going on next for you?
So there are two things I'm working on right now. So in fact, even though the quarantine is going on, but I'm actually going to go to Korea, going to travel there because my wife is Korean. I'm in fact, even though this movie takes place in the Korean community, but I'm actually Taiwanese American. But my wife is Korean. That's a community I know well. But we're going to go to Korea at the end of the month, and I'm hoping to shoot a short film in Korea that doesn't deal with religion, but that deals, I think there's some similarities there with this film in terms of kind of dealing with contemporary anxiety, in terms of the anxiety that people have in this modern age, especially given COVID, everything that's going on. So it's another comedy that hopefully can have something meaningful and interesting to say about what it means to live in today's world. So that's the immediate next project. The more long-term project, I'm not trying to do a feature version of this because on the one hand, I feel like I've already exhausted this particular storyline. But the idea, the tension of religion and the way it manifests in everyday life, that's a topic I'm always fascinated by. And my favorite films, whether it's Rossellini or Dreyer or any number of filmmakers, Lee Chang-dong, you can name. I love films that really deal with that. So I'm trying to make a feature film that it's not quite the same story, but that has similar ideas and themes that it's dealing with.
Well, I think the way you speak about it in your work is the way the way it should be evolving in our storytelling. What we see on film and everything. So I mean, I'm excited for that. You are such I love hearing from you. Such a wise filmmaker, and that brings me to finally say that is there any advice that you could share with other filmmakers out there that would like to follow in your footsteps, that just want to make their mark? Have you got any advice that maybe you've been taught, or maybe you follow by in your everyday work and life?
Yeah, I think a couple things come to mind immediately. One is, I think, really just persistence, because with this, I think with this particular film, there was a lot of urgency. Like, I really want to make it. So I think without that initial urgency, I might have kind of sat around and doodled and thought more about it. But I found that when you really set your mind to it, you just got to follow through and be disciplined about the process, whether it's the writing process or the pre-production process. Like, filmmaking really is about perseverance, because it's so easy, especially when you're an independent filmmaker. A lot of the time there is no oversight, no one telling you what to do. So I think to really trust in yourself, believe in yourself, and be very disciplined about it, and not doodle and dick around. I think that's actually very important. But the second thing really is, again, we just work with good people. I think this film would have been so much worse without my producers, without my cast and the crew that I brought on, many of whom are personal friends of mine who frankly are much more experienced than I am, and wiser than I am. So I think collaborators, finding good, trustworthy collaborators that you can learn from, that goes a long way in the filmmaking process.
Team is everything, isn't it?
It really is. It's a complete team sport. People always say that. It's like, auteur and versus, is it the director himself? Is it not? Is it, I think we can debate about that all we want, but really having a team, it's 100% about collaboration. It's team sport.
It's so true. Well, I'm so glad that you brought this film to us at NewFilmmakers LA. I'm excited to see your next short, and best wishes with the filming of that, and also your feature that will be coming after that. So thank you very much for bringing your talent to us, Eugene, and we are looking forward to your next project. But thank you for bringing Master of Divinity, because that was fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Danny, and thank you all for supporting the film. It really means a lot. I'm honored to have been a part of this.